Phil and Inga, welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast.
It's great to be back, Robbie. Lovely to be here.
Thanks, Robbie. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and you're right, Phil. It should be for you. Welcome back. You were episode 2 on the podcast. This is always risky because sometimes I don't release these episodes in quite the order they're recorded. Let's say this will almost certainly be episode 28. So the journey has continued. But as I said just before we switched on the recording, I was listening back to the interview that we did in it came out in kind of November 2019. So we probably recorded it in the autumn of that year. And it's a great interview for anyone who hasn't listened. I recommend going back. And of course, what a lot has happened in the world since November 2019. How innocent of what might happen we were.
Absolutely, yeah, that was true.
And Inga, welcome to the show. It's a total pleasure to have you here. We've known each other for a few years, and we might get into that because there's some little abundance echoes, I think, in that for me, which is one of the reasons when we thought that we could possibly have this conversation with the three of us, particularly about some work that you two are doing together, and we'll get into that as we go. It felt like a really nice thing for me because there's, we first met, I think, at a workshop that Phil was running about possibility, but which had some real strong echoes, I think, of the work that you're doing now. So very excited to have you on the show and great to have you here. And maybe, Inga, we could start, as we often do on this podcast, by asking you when you first came across coaching.
Excellent question. And just, I think it's worth noting also that when you and I met, that was also your before. You weren't a coach yet back then.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So it was like, I went along to an event because as part of, I think I'd already signed up, or I was about to do some training with Phil. And it was an event they were running, the coaching school were running. And yeah, you were there because you were a recent graduate as part. And what I love about that coaching school, and we've also had James on the podcast from who was trained at the coaching school, and what I love about it is it does feel, I don't know if you feel like this, Phil, it does feel like an incubator for amazing people and partnerships. And Mike and I and Inga, we're talking about possibly doing some work at the moment. I'm doing some work with Nina O'Farrell on a leadership program that we are working on together. I know that you, Phil, it popped up in my little pre-show research, have got another new venture with another person from that amazing incubator of a few years. So that's super cool, and I'm glad that we're doing some more of that today. Yeah, and it was right on the cusp of coaching for me in 2015, June 2015. I had a look, and it's been a journey since then.
Yeah. So to come back to your original question, it's kind of an interesting one for me because looking backwards in sort of in hindsight, I came across coaching before I even knew what coaching was. So I didn't recognize it when I first saw it. And probably for me, the pivotal moment was, I think I just started in my first job. I was just 21 years old and I was driving my little Ford Fiesta, like halfway across the country to some godforsaken industrial estate to work on an IT project. And one of my colleagues gifted me a CD of one of Tony Robbins's personal development programs. And sort of the journeys were long and I was usually traveling sort of ridiculously early and, needed something to keep me awake. So I sort of popped it in and, now I recognize that as a kind of coaching and teaching hybrid. Back then, I just thought it's what an amazing thing to invite into my life where somebody who's kind of traveled the journey and learned so much can, with just a few powerful questions without giving the answers, really awaken something in me. So, I remember driving along and I'd be like, I shout out the answer and, participating. And so that kept me awake, maybe even alive. So I'd say maybe coaching saved my life, maybe not.
and to set the scene, where was that, across the UK or across somewhere else? And which Tony Robbins program was it? Do you remember?
I think it was called Personal Power. I think he actually still has it. It has like Personal Power 2 now, and he has many, many others. Yes, I was, I was born in Latvia, kind of grew up behind the Iron Curtain and then moved to the UK when I was 15. So, and sort of lived here ever since, and then another part of the story where I actually went back 3 years ago and completely changed my life to live a different lifestyle. But back then, yes, I was working for a consultancy company in the UK, kind of junior analyst, and eventually became a project manager, and eventually change management, which has really opened me up to the idea of coaching and becoming aware of it. But back then I was just, a green little shoot.
Yeah.
Learning about the world.
I wonder, actually, we haven't, surprisingly, on this podcast in whatever we're up to, 27 episodes or so, there's been very little discussion of Tony Robbins. And I wonder if maybe you could, for someone who at least in that way has, I don't know his work that well, apart from the Netflix documentary, which I watched, and having heard some interviews with him. What do you think? Like, he has a very special place, an important place in the kind of what we might call, I guess, the personal development world. What do you think it is about him that captured you then on that drive and kept you awake and had that impact?
Good question. I don't know if you know, I actually worked for the guy for a while. So I coached for his organization. So I kind of have a bit of an inside view and the outside view. But way back then, for me, it was the power of the question. And yes, he does have I'd say he occupies a specific place on the coaching spectrum in terms of, if we think about kind of more holding the space and just being non-directed at one end and being quite directional at the other end. I would personally put him more at the directional end.
I think that end of the spectrum is actually called the Tony Robbins end. Of the
yeah, there's the directional and there's the Tony Robbins end, which is another mile out. And he teaches as well. So he doesn't just kind of, in my view, doesn't just kind of stick with the International Coaching Federation definition of coaching. He does take quite he's got this incredible mind, and seems that he's mapped out all the different patterns of human behavior and kind of created these models in his, mind castle. And you can see this from his Netflix documentary. He kind of navigates it, and he sort of does a few testing questions to land. And, he really is present and works with a person. And then he can be quite provocative, and for me, that feels like that is taking on a lot of responsibility as a coach. It is quite directive, and it is quite, there is an element of teaching and mentoring in there as well. So it's kind of it's a bit different to the standard definition of a coach, I'd say.
Yeah,
very powerful.
Very powerful. And I think you're right. There's something, and I've seen other people do this in different ways as well. I think there is something that when you've been doing this as long as someone like Tony Robbins has, that pattern recognition inside his mind, at least this is what comes across. I'm sure there are times when he misses the mark, and obviously they don't include those in a Netflix show. But to me, watching that, it reminded me of other people I've seen closer up in, who I've worked with and things like that, who have really so much experience of people that their pattern recognition is so good that actually it looks like they're being directive and they're jumping to conclusions, but their kind of presence can be like, actually what they're doing is just listening incredibly deeply and seeing things that I can't see because I've only got 1,500 hours of working with people, not however many thousands Tony Robbins or somebody else has.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, I've been to all of his, not every single one event, but every type of event he holds. I've been to them all because part of my job back then. And I've seen how he interacts live. And I would say there's never been an interaction where it just sort of failed, because he's extremely good at picking up the cues from the other person. If he misses with a question, he picks it up immediately and he tries another question. And unless you're really paying attention to his method, you will miss that he missed. So he's very good at kind of being present and continuing to build and try, and that's not that path. Okay, let me back up, try this path.
Yeah.
In my experience and opinion, that is really when you walk into masterful coaching. It's extraordinarily powerful when you have that ability to scan what's going on, pick up the cues so quickly, and be really fast in terms of getting into what is actually at the nub of an issue. You can move mountains in no time at all. So you can see that when he does hit the mark, it's absolutely on point and people are transformed. Yeah. And when he doesn't, you're right, Ingo, there's that ability to quickly pivot and still keep working until you get there, and it speeds things up. It's really, it's extraordinary to watch.
Yeah, and it reminds me a little bit. It's like, when you're starting out, if you think back to when, well, for example, when you and I were starting out, Inga, we were watching Phil, and actually the amount that you could do then, Phil, compared to what I felt like I could do in a short space of time was enormous. Because it is like you can't even see what's happening all the time. And I think that it's interesting to think about. I could ask some of the people who I do group work with now. For all I know, what I do looks like that now, because why is he choosing that? Why is he saying that? How does he know to ask that question? And there's a lot going on in those moments.
And sorry.
No, carry on.
I would say it does become part of kind of with sort of called physical mastery in a way. It just we start off being, of course, consciously or probably unconsciously incompetent. We don't even know what we don't know. We bring it to our consciousness. We realize we're consciously incompetent. We take some training. We slowly become consciously competent to the point where we become unconsciously competent. We don't even know what we're doing. It just becomes a muscle memory of sorts. And I think that's why it's so amazing what you've done, Phil, with the coaching school, is to kind of reach back down in there into the subconscious mastery and then codify it and share it with the world. I think that's just so valuable.
But you know what, for anybody who's watching, who's on their coaching journey, what you described is exactly right. And when you reach that point where it's unconsciously competent, the only way you can really screw it up is to start thinking too much. Literally, it's kind of like paragliding or something, where you've got to trust yourself to just jump off the cliff. And once you do, and you've done it a few times, you think, well, I just got to let it fly. And it feels really easy, but sometimes you kind of look back on the day and go, whew, okay, well, I don't know quite where all of that came from.
And that's the anxiety as a new coach. I still remember when I was a new coach, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be like, right, so this person, they last time they talked about this, what questions am I going to ask? And what if they say that, like mapping, trying to consciously map the conversation, which of course you can't, because after the first question, you're off piste, right? So that is part of the coaching mastery. It's the presence, and partly it's the pattern recognition, partly it's the coaching skills, and then the knowing how to translate whatever impulse you get into the question and into the space.
Yeah, and we might come back, because I think there's also something which is in the work that the two of you are doing on abundance about trusting. And there's something in coaching that actually there's a really nice, it's basically, I think it's I'll try and find a link to it, because it's really nice actually for coaches to, I think, help make that shift that we're talking about. It's from A Course in Miracles, which I won't go into. For those listeners who don't know, I won't go into what that is now, but it's like, okay, well, maybe you could explain what A Course in Miracles is. I don't really know about it. There's a guy called Alan Cohen, and he's pulled a bit out of A Course in Miracles, which he gives to everyone who trains with him to read before every session. And it is essentially a trust prayer. And one of my members of the community Coach's Journey community has been playing with it recently as a way to, or we've been playing with it there as a way to begin to make that, I think, or help with that shift that we're talking about. Yeah, so just because you probably know it better than me, one of you, because Phil, you were nodding as well about A Course in Miracles. I love that this is coming up, but one of you explain A Course in Miracles.
I'm going to throw this one to Inga, because I think she probably knows more than I do. I was probably just nodding and smiling.
Oh my goodness, how do you explain A Course in Miracles? I'd sum it up. It's a really big book, and it comes in 3 parts. And there's a theory part. I kind of see a bit of a parallel with coaching, right? There's a bit of theory. Then there's 365 daily practices in the course. First part is learning how to stop, like how you're unlearning for the first part, and 365 daily practices, obviously a year. So half a year you're unlearning old stuff, and then the other half of the year you're putting new behaviors and new thoughts and new ways of thinking about the world in. And then there's a third part, which is a manual for teachers. So it's, once you've learned it, it almost becomes a sense of your duty to share it further in the world, and there's a sort of a manual around that. And if I was to summarize what's it all about, it's about trust, actually, and trusting your kind of higher self and not letting the mind get in the way.
Yeah. And there are lots of ways that people can learn about it. Do you have a recommended one? If someone's just heard that, or they check so we'll put a link to everything we talk about in the show notes. They'll find that link to the part that Alan Cohen talks about, because I'll put that in because it's really nice. If they want to learn more, where did you learn about it, or how did you learn, or where do you recommend?
So there's a couple of things. There's the book itself, and you literally just put it in Amazon, and there is the book, and it's a big blue book.
But isn't it a bit like those kind of like what's the Thomas Piketty one, Inequality? It's like a book that lots of people own and no one has read because it's so long.
Probably, exactly. And you can, the way that I actually got into it, the Marianne Williamson, she currently has a program running, which is really affordable. It's like $50 or something, where every day she sends you a video of reading the daily lesson and then her commentary. And I just feel really inspired because she applies it in the real world and shares her experiences. So I kind of listen to it for 5 minutes every morning, and then usually it's like 3 times a day, remember that you are more than just who you think you are. Okay, set timer, do it.
Yeah,
I haven't read the text, it's very complex.
What a daily practice, though.
You know what, Robbie, I think this is such an interesting conversation already. Things are tying together. You talk about getting to that unconscious competence and trusting yourself. We talked about Tony Robbins and his approach and his intuitive nature and how he studies humans. You talk about A Course in Miracles. Every coach pretty much has a shelf full of books in their background of all sorts of personal development things, and they've got a ton of courses that they've taken and people that they've worked with and their own personal coaching that they've had. And when you think about how do you get to that unconscious competence, how do you learn to trust yourself, all of that information, all of that learning, all of that growth that you synthesize over the years and experience and all the coaching you do, it all gets logged away in the computer, right? And it's all there, ready to be accessed. And we have this extraordinary ability to do that in a nanosecond, almost instantaneously, to filter through all of that, to Google it, and to pull out what seems like the most appropriate response in that moment. And when you start to really trust yourself, you might pull out something you've seen from Tony Robbins, you might pull out something you've done from A Course in Miracles, and you probably not even aware you're doing that. But all of those resources are at your fingertips. And the trust is to trust that the right thing will come at the right time, and the Google in your brain will find it for you. But it's amazing and extraordinary how accurate it can be.
Yeah, and it's worth saying, that was kind of in, when I talked about that pattern recognition with Tony Robbins, that was kind of in there. It's worth saying another book that a lot of people have on their shelves and haven't read is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, because when I read it, it's really hard to read. It took me a long time to get through. It's quite dull. So I'm going to explain it in 3 seconds or in 2 minutes, which is to draw it together, because I think you're absolutely right. And it's sometimes helpful to know that a Nobel Prize winning behavioral scientist says exactly what Phil just said. So if Phil's expertise is not enough for you to believe what he's just said, that's what Thinking Fast and Slow is. And it's the thinking fast part of it is our intuition built up from the sum of our experiences. And one of my favorite bits, or at least one of the most memorable bits of that book for me, was the stories he tells about a fire chief who takes his whole team into this building and then orders them out seconds before the whole thing goes down, because somewhere in his pattern recognition there's something off about how much smoke and how much fire there is. And actually what was happening was the fire's in the basement, so the whole thing is structurally unsound. He didn't know that consciously, but his intuition told him to get out. Similarly, amazing stories about cancer doctors who can essentially diagnose cancer on intuition. Their intuition on doing that is so good because they've spent so much time diagnosing cancer with patients thousands of times that they can kind of feel it on intuition. Now, those things sound like magic, as does Tony Robbins's moments of coaching, as does the intuition. When we're in a coaching session and we're super present, that intuition feels like magic. And in some ways it is, and it's more fun to believe in magic. And in some ways it's more fun and empowering to know that it's the sum of all that experience that we've had.
Yeah, and it's an explanation of abundance, in my opinion, as well, which we're going to go on to talk about. but what an extraordinary wealth and richness of resource we have from everything we've experienced in our whole lives, whether you believe that you can access beyond that into the whole universe and the energy that's out there or not. Even what we've taken in and internalized, years and years and years of sensory stimulation and then interpretation through our brains and learning and education. So we've just got so much there. And that's why you can jump off the cliff with the paraglider and you can fly, even though it might seem like magic. It's common sense in some ways, and a lot of the actual coaching mastery just comes down to throw yourself in there, trust yourself, practice, learn, and you're going to be the fire chief in a few years' time, and you'll be able to sniff out that danger or spot that opening so quickly in a Tony Robbins style way.
I mean, I still remember from that Netflix documentary, there's a woman stands up and says, I'm having difficulty with my diet. She's a young, beautiful, attractive woman. And within 3 questions, they're talking about her relationship with her father and him being an alcoholic. And it's like, it's the fire chief thing, right? What's the pattern what's the subconscious competence, the abundance of information you've already got in there, that's just trusting it's already there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is definitely an encouragement, isn't it, to practice, because Tony Robbins has just done that with so many people. One of the other people I've seen do it, and actually who also does A Course in Miracles work, is Robert Holden, and he used to have like a radio show on Hay House Radio every week for I don't know, years, where people would call in and they would essentially do mini coaching / mentoring / teaching / spiritual teaching. And you can kind of feel it when you're with him as well. It's like, oh yeah, he's just like, he just kind of gives you something, and it's not quite coaching, but it's absolutely beautiful. So we love this little place we're in, but Inga, I want to because you've already dropped us like hints of places we're going to hit on your journey, to kind of bring us closer to the present, or the good slip of the tongue, Robbie, bring us closer to the presence. So you listen to Tony Robbins, and then at some point, and that, I guess, like for many of us, and I think this is true of when we come to coaching training, for many of us, coaching training is not our first exposure to the idea that we can, the conversation, questions, how we think can all change things for us. And but so somewhere though, after that, you came to coaching how we would think about it. Do you remember how that happened, or what the next steps were?
I do remember, and it was probably another 10 years fast forward from that first moment, where I was facing a decision in my own career, and I was kind of at a crossroads. And I don't know if this is, serendipity, or, I mean, I don't really believe in coincidences, but quite coincidentally, I received an email from a recruitment agency who I hadn't really signed up for. It just dropped in my inbox, and there was a little side note from Phil saying, are you thinking, are you facing a question about your career? Are you thinking of changing your career? If yes, click here. And I was like, yes, I am. Click here.
And what was the recruitment agency?
I think it was called Fresh Minds.
Okay, and let's just pause. So Phil, because we didn't talk about Fresh Minds the last time. So is this in the phase of you building up the career coaching business? Like, how does a little note from you end up on the side of a recruitment agency's email?
Well, this is called using your sense of possibility, right? When we talk about the abundance formula, you say it's mindset, possibilities, and then boldness. So I was thinking about how do I find people who are looking to change career and looking to do something different and something new? And where do they go for their information, and who's in their network? And obviously, one place that they often go to in some way or another is a recruitment consultancy, because if you want to change jobs, you go to somebody who has different jobs. So it occurred to me that if I went and talked to some recruitment consultancies and found ones that kind of served the sort of audience I was looking at, which were professional services people who were maybe looking to do something a bit more interesting, that some of the people who go to the recruitment consultancy don't just want the same job in a different company, but actually might want to do something a bit more interesting. when I went to talk to Fresh Minds, who I was introduced to by somebody in my network, they said, yeah, about a third of the people we get don't really know what their next job is, and they're very difficult for us to deal with because we just want straightforward transactions so we can get our cuts and place people in without too much time and energy into the next job. So if you could come in and help us to redirect some of these people, help them get much clearer on what they want and what's purposeful for them, what they enjoy, and what that might look like in terms of the next destination, then we could pick up with them afterwards. So we did a little deal, and they put me on their newsletter, which I think had 30 or 40,000 subscribers on it. And yeah, it was a source of leads along with many other, but it's just a little, using the possibilities, joining the dots, and then being a bit bold about making that request. And I can't remember what our commercial arrangement was, but it was, it was just a very useful way of growing the business.
Yeah. And was that you, Inga, at the time, professional services, but looking for something more interesting? And,
yep.
and what happened then?
Well, so I think this is where we come to the third part of the abundance. The formula is boldness. It took boldness from my part to say, yes, don't know what coaching is, don't know what this person's offering.
Yeah. Let's speak to that, because I don't think that everyone, I get what you mean, but I don't think that everyone would think of that as boldness necessarily, especially once you're inside coaching, right? It feels like, oh, it's obvious that I would do coaching. Like, why wouldn't everyone? But
right.
That's not what it's like necessarily when you are thinking about it. So if you're up for it, like, and what you can remember, why did that require boldness?
Well, I think for me, it didn't even use the word coaching from what I can remember. It just really spoke to the exact question I'm asking myself. It was something like, are you looking to do something more interesting in your career? And I was like, yes, here's the button, yes. And of course, I don't know what I'm saying yes to, because the next step was the real bold one. Clicking the button is like a mini bold step. But the moment I click the button, fill in your details. And this is where I think, just to really slow it down for coaches who are thinking about using this kind of method and mechanism of connecting with people, I still remember the response that I received from Phil, and I still tell people about it because I feel it was truly bold and done in such a loving and welcoming way, because I didn't receive here's a link, book yourself in, or what times can you make? What I received was, how about 9 a.m. Pan Quotidien, Waterloo? And I was like, yes. Right? It wasn't like, oh, let me check my diary, I'll come back to it later. It was just so easy to say yes. I don't know what I was saying yes to. I was going to meet some random dude at a cafe.
You live to tell the tale, fortunately.
I did.
And this is so interesting. I didn't know we were going to get to this, but this is cool because we can get both sides of this, right? So it sounds like for Inga as the client, it was just such a relief to have like the kind of here's like the leadership from you, Phil. What was because you're such a strategist, from the strategist point of view, or from your coaching side of things, how come that was the response? So you got some kind of form from Inga saying, I'm interested, and your response was basically, let's meet here and then.
In the same way that we were talking about the learning that goes and the practice that goes into it, this was through a process of experimenting, right? I kind of assumed that when I first started out, I got a prospect that they would want lots of choices because people like choice. So I was like, what about this, that, or the other? And I can be very accommodating. And 98% of those fish will swim straight through the net because it was just not, it was not tight. There was, as you said, there was no leadership in that situation at all. And I thought, well, maybe people just want leadership and they want certainty. So I experimented with it. I started saying, as soon as I got a prospect in, what about this time, this date, this place? Let's do it. No choices. And it works. And it's what I still do today, both in terms of with prospects and in terms of scheduling my clients as well. Like, I never ask my clients when they want. I send them a date and time. And they, 90% of them say yes, 90% of the time. So it makes life easy for everyone. And I think you're so right, Robbie. The idea of leadership, like, people are looking to their coach to take control, because Inga's saying it's bold to reach out to some random stranger, right? So they're looking for somebody who has the confidence to take control of the transaction, to lead them through it, to make it easy, to show them what is possible, and to make it easy to see that if it's what they want, they can say yes to it very easily, and they know how to make it happen. So I think our job as the business person in the coaching side of things is to take the lead and to show people how to do it and how coaching works, and to make it easy for them to then sign up.
Yeah, and just to add my little bit to that, I can double down on this now, Phil, because you've given me permission. But through that example, but what I noticed was that I think I used to do, of course, what everyone does, which is like give as much choice as possible, especially when you really want to speak to the people. And what I noticed is I can't remember exactly how and why this happened, but as I cut that down to basically saying a very tight, not quite as tight as that, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for one from now on, but usually 2, maybe 3 options, and a very tight follow-up question. Like, if none of these work, tell me some times that do. And of course, people don't always follow that because people aren't good at managing diaries and all that kind of thing. But what I noticed was, as soon as I started doing that, I got fewer cancellations. So far less often would I be stood up. As soon as it felt so obvious and clear that those 2 things were connected for me.
And I think the fear is that if you give people one choice, they say, oh, I can't do that. But what then happens is they say, I can't do that, but I can do this.
Right. And if only getting one choice is the thing that stops them working with you, like they were probably never going to work with you anyway. If they're like, well, he only gave me one choice, I'm off, then that's probably okay.
No, but when people say, I can do this, they've switched from being in this space of choosing into the space of actually making, leading that choice right now. And they're like, actually, I can't do this, but I can meet you at this time in this place. And you're like, well, if you can meet me then, I can meet you there too. Great, let's do it.
Nice. And so let's keep tying up the story. So you, Inga, then, like, I know this, you ended up working with Phil, right?
Yeah.
And that was then you had exposure to coaching from the client side.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that then connect to, in the end, training as a coach and bringing that coaching more explicitly into your work?
So Phil and I did some amazing work together. And as a result, I left the work that I was doing. I pivoted quite significantly. I actually left a full-time job to go independent and set up my own company. It was still within the same world of consulting, but it was quite a change. And we kind of wrapped it up, and then there was a bit of a gap. And then I think this is another point for coaches: the end of a coaching series, the coaching package or whatever it was agreed isn't the end, because actually we reconnected probably was, I don't know, some months or a year later, and it was just Phil connecting and saying, same place, I am in the Pancourt Tidiane by Waterloo at this time, do you want to meet for a coffee? And it was literally just let's meet for a coffee, which is where he shared his vision for the coaching school. And I was like, never thought about being a coach, don't really want to be a coach, seems quite scary to be a coach, you're so good, I'm not, could never be that good, all of that limiting belief stuff, but I'd love to learn. And for me it was about, well, this will help me be a better parent, had a teenage son at the time, this will help me be a better colleague, a better leader, a better this, and I love learning, I'd probably do it just for the sake of learning, but I didn't go into it thinking I want to be a coach and I'm going to change my career and become a coach. I just think these are such invaluable life skills, whether you practice as a coach or not. So I was like, yeah, sign me up. When are we starting? Which is
hilarious, because when we were sitting in the Pancourt and doing our original set of coaching, I had this amazing, super powered woman who was like, yeah, and I did the Tony Robbins stuff, and then I read all of these books, and I've been working on this, and I have these amazing habits that I put in place. And I was like, wow, I'm quite slightly intimidated by this, because actually you seem to know almost more than I do. And I kind of had you pinned down. I was like, yeah, you'd be an amazing coach or something similar, just because of that drive that I saw in you for self-development. So it's like, yeah, this is a good one here.
And Phil, were you just again? It's too good an opportunity not to ask some of these questions about the kind of ins and outs of this, because enrolling for a coaching training program is different to client work, but there's also things that are similar, or depending on how you do it. In the last interview we did, and if people want to learn more about Phil and how he built his business and that kind of thing, definitely check out that second episode. And we talk about the career coaching business and the coaching school in there a little bit too. One of the things you said you do is you had a practice of reaching out to old clients to just reconnect. Was it just a part of that, or was there a specific, maybe like with all of what you've just said in mind, of all the people in my network who might do this new training with me, Inga would be a good person to do that? Like what was going on?
It was exactly what you just said, Robbie.
Yeah.
Again, this is going into the possibilities and the boldness, right?
Yeah.
I had this idea that I wanted to do coach training. I needed to get it started. I wanted to share everything that I was learning, and I needed a group of people who had some credence in who I was. So the obvious place to go was to my network, and particularly to some of the clients I had who I'd always thought, and through conversation, there were lots of clues in there that they'd be interested in this kind of thing. So I just hooked up some conversations with people who I thought would be a good fit and would probably love it. And seeing Inga's passion for self-development and personal growth, I was like, she's going to want to do this course whether she actually wants to be a coach or not, because it's just going to be a great experience. And again, it's making the possibilities come through making connections and joining things together in your head. So I was just doing that, and then it's just the boldness to again ask the question, and then I just effectively went and pitched it, and luckily enough people kind of signed up to get it started, and Inga was one of them. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and Inga, you have used that coaching. I know. Well, you've already hinted at some of the things you've done. I know you've used it in other ways too. You did that training with Phil and his colleagues at the time. How did the training impact your work, and how have you used it since then?
It's a good question. I love that. Just winding my mind back, I still remember, and I think, Phil, this was your metaphor, and you sort of reflected back to me later. I turned up to that coaching, which is another boldness step of mine. I don't even know what I just want to do what Phil does. It's really fun. I want to be able to talk like that with my son, and I want to be able to lead in that way in my life. So I want to learn that, but am I going to have to, and I kind of didn't really think much about, I'll actually have to do it. I just wanted to kind of learn it. So I remember turning up, and it was almost like using the metaphor of like walking around the edge of the swimming pool. And I was like, I don't think I'll be getting in. Like, I'll just listen and learn and take some notes. And like, half an hour in, it's like, right, you're going into groups of 3, start coaching. Here's your tools, go do it. And I was like, I don't have to do it. Oh, okay. And it was like the moment I was in there, the moment I was, in the moment, in the seat, listening, receiving, being present, I was like in the pool. I was like, that's it. I'm doing this. I don't know how yet. I'm in. And at the end of the first module, if you remember, it's like, okay, guys, you got everything you need. Go and get yourself some clients. I'm like, what? Like, I thought I'd just be doing it, with my friends and family. And then I have to get clients. So that's kind of where it started. And it took me quite some time I sort of ran that. It was a bit of a hobby project and then sort of alongside the work I was doing as a consultant still. And it took another, I guess it's a possibility and boldness step, for me to realize I wanted to completely up sticks and sell everything in the UK and move back to the country I was born in, which is Latvia, which is 3 years ago. And I was like, what do I know? What skill do I have that I can do from anywhere in the world? And at the time, we didn't have this everyone can work remotely option. And coaching was the answer. I love doing it. I was pretty good at it, not that practiced yet. I was a client of Tony Robbins' organization, so I was getting a lot of support that way. And they kind of said, one of the things I learned again through a coaching conversation was, why not this? Pack up the consulting career and take this with you and live from the beach and do what you always wanted to do. Have a bit more of a freedom around my time and do something that I really enjoy doing.
Mm. And was that when you started working for Tony Robbins' company as well?
Yes. I mean, that was a bit intense, to be fair. They have one of the most extended interview processes I've ever come across. It was 3 months of interview and training and assessment. It's like a 3-month assessment center, basically, including a trip to New York and attending one of the events and being given ridiculous tasks in hotels where you have to go and find someone in the lobby, convince them to be coached, coach them, record it, submit it. You got 30 minutes, go. So things like that. So I did join their organization and received 40 coaching clients as a minimum. And this is where the practice just became really enforced.
And this is why you and Phil are great colleagues for each other, because Phil too has had times when he's had crazy numbers of coaching clients, like the fire hose thing. So Phil, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, if you were walking around the swimming pool at the start of the coach training, by this point you're at the bottom of the deep end, right?
Yeah. I was like, shit, maybe I should have learned to swim like quite well before doing this bit. Yeah. But that's how you learn, right? You just kind of.
Well, it can be, right? But I think there are people who, like, well, there's those models of that. There's a bit beyond the stretch zone, right? Which is the kind of panic zone, and swimming is a good example. Like the water is actually a good example of this. There's like, if you lose your cool in the water, then it gets dangerous. And so what it sounds like you learned by the 40 coaching clients and, practiced and stayed afloat. But what was that like? And what did you learn from that and from working with that company?
I mean, I learned a huge amount. It was so compressed, such a compressed time scale. Their training, I would say, you can't compare it with the coaching schools. It's just a completely different skill set, because they train in the specific kind of tools and methodologies that Tony uses. So you basically learn to become like a mini Tony, because you're coaching his clients, and you learn how to do that pattern recognition thing, how to step in and kind of lead, how to be quite directive in and influencing in the whole conversation as well. Of course, in the direction of the client's desired result. For me, in hindsight, I did overdo it, because in parallel, I was also renovating an apartment, selling an apartment, moving countries, packing up my whole life, and working as a management consultant, implementing IT across Scandinavia and traveling backwards and forwards. So I was waking up at like 5 a.m. coaching New Zealand, staying up until 9 p.m. coaching California, and then in the middle of the day, running workshops in Stockholm Airport on the new labor management software. So I think there's something that it's about balance, isn't it? It's something about, yes, jump in at the deep end, but in the end, I did have to take 6 months off once I'd moved.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because we had a funny conversation just before we switched on the recording about how because and currently we're recording this in end of June, you're currently isolating because of traveling between countries because in the pandemic. And what you've done is booked in like calls all day, every day this week, which sounds a little bit like moving a house, renovating a flat, having 40 Tony Robbins clients, and doing consulting in Stockholm Airport. Is that because some people love that level of activity. I think there are people who buzz off that and absolutely love it, but that was too much for you, was it? Like how, or what was it like? Or are you someone who buzzes off that?
I do up to a point, and I think this is where it's really useful to know where your limits are. I mean, even this week, I'm noticing it's Tuesday afternoon, and I'm like, I'm kind of like ready for the weekend. So it's probably better if I pace myself. And I think one of the things I'm noticing about my learning processes and the journey to mastery of anything is that the kind of turnaround time of noticing to implementing a change just reduces. So when I was doing the crazy 40 clients, it took me 6 months of running full speed and just feeling quite tired all the time before I kind of noticed and did something about it. Today, it's Tuesday. It took me 2 days. And I've already implemented, like I've taken 2 days off next week. That's it, and it's about shortening, for me, it's about shortening that awareness to implementing change, boldness cycle.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting that. I had one earlier this year because we had a baby, and I was just like, I can't believe I need to think about my schedule again. Like, I was really gutted. I was like, I've thought about my calendar like so much over the year. I thought I finally had it fixed. And then, of course, I change, or the world changes, and it might need looking at again. And I think you're absolutely right. It took me not an insignificant amount of time and energy to well, both make the changes and actually for me also adjust like my sense of identity to, oh wait, if my changes are like this, I'm different, what I do is different. And there was so it's not only the actual making the change for me, but it's also that change becoming more a part of me. And so Inga, bring us like up to date. Like, what are you working on at the moment? And I know part of that is the abundance formula, which I really want to get into, but there are other things in your orbit too. So how on the back of that 6 months off and the moving back to Latvia, how have you created your work and life now?
It's really lovely actually to kind of go through that whole experience from the moment where that was the moment of realization way back when I reached out to Phil, or said yes to Phil's question. It was that I want something more in my life than just the work I was doing. And it feels like it has been a process of, over 10 years or so, where, looking back now, I've completely reconfigured what I do and how I do it. So right now I live in Latvia. I'm living in a house on the beach in a forest. I work 2.5 days a week for this really inspiring consultancy company called Curve. They're a creative consultancy company. We run leadership workshops online. So they used to run everything in person, and with the pandemic, it's become, a possibility, new possibilities to do that work completely remotely. So I do that 2.5 days a week.
And for anyone who's interested, just want to catch it, like one of the flagship workshops, right, is how to run a really good online workshop, which I think is like, I've been trying to find a date that I can come along. We've been talking about this. It's like, because there's, in this world we live in, that is a skill which is only going to become more and more useful. And so I just want to highlight that for people, because I think it's people who like you and have enjoyed getting to know you over the last hour or so, will might be curious to jump on one of those. How do people find those if they're interested?
I can jump onto curve.cc, which is our website, or even on LinkedIn, and we're on Eventbrite. Look for us there, Curve.
Cool. And so sorry, I interrupted though. Yeah.
That's all right. And actually, yes, their flagship used to be called the Workshop, which is a workshop on how to run workshops, which is now the Remote Workshop. And interestingly, so we do kind of, Curve has 2 types of work that we do. We do Learning Curve, which is where we teach skills, like running workshops remotely, like for providing feedback. We even teach some light coaching skills into organizations, which I find really inspiring. And then we do Growth Curve, which is kind of bespoke leadership workshops, let's say, on strategy or on team dynamics or whatever it might be. And that's the one thing that I'm noticing more and more. Our clients are really interested in having the one-to-one coaching to kind of complement the workshops. So recently we just did a project with a creative agency, a PR company in the UK, based in the UK. And we took their leadership team of 9 people through here's a workshop of how you want to be working together. And then we coached each individual through a process of then arriving at a completely reconfigured different place emotionally, mentally, and how they work together. And we're noticing that more and more and more so, it's not just the work, and it's not just the cognitive work. It's more about emotional intelligence, about collaboration, co-creation, and those are new skills. And those skills seem to be best taught in one of the great ways of teaching it is a coaching relationship.
Yeah, really nice and really interesting. Both that, I guess there's the awareness and the appetite to take those opportunities up, because that does feel like, that feels like a powerful intervention. And it's a little similar to what, Phil and I were talking about last time he was on the show, about some of the ways that his business has evolved, that combination of the one-on-one support with other other support is really interesting for making change. And then, so tell me, how and where does the abundance formula fit into this, and how did it come about?
So it'll be interesting to hear, Phil, how you.
Let's do that in a minute. Let's do that in a minute. But first, without asking Phil, without cheating, like, how did it happen?
So for me, it was, Phil and I have been, we've stayed in touch. I mean, I find my conversation, every single conversation with Phil, just inspirational. I always walk away with this positive buzzing. And I think it is that, the mindset shifts. All of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of new possibilities available to me, and the bold steps become really clear and not so scary anymore. So, as I kind of had reconfigured my life, that I was also moved to Chile for a year and a bit straight after I moved to Latvia. So I'd just come back and I was like, yeah, I think this whole thing about like, I'm just going to retire and live on the beach and not do anything ever again probably isn't quite what I want to do. So I started to reach out to my, networks and people who I feel I can inspire me. And we were just having conversations kind of on a weekly basis. And this is when the pandemic was really starting to kick off at, springtime 2020. And through these conversations, we came across this idea and this sense of, this stuff that we're sharing here, the world needs this. And there's like, the world really needs this now. There's so much uncertainty and people are having to deal with so much. This is a great opportunity. Let's do something. Let's do something. And then, it started to unfold from there, this initial desire to share what we were sharing in our conversations out further out into the world.
Yeah, and before we bring you in, Phil, it's interesting. I put out to the Coach's Journey community that I was going to be speaking to you both and what we were going to be speaking about. And one of the questions was from Alex, who's a member of the community, was just to ask about abundance in the face of really difficult conditions. It's like, can we do that? And indeed, is that in fact the ideal time and the most important time to be talking about something like this and what you're talking about? And it sounds like, it was born in the pandemic. It sounds like the answer to that is yes. Now's the time. Is that what it feels like, that when things are difficult can be a particularly important time to begin to think about the things that you're talking about?
I mean, I would say, when do you not want abundance in your life? Like, every time is a good time to realize that there are infinite number of possibilities right here, right now, and that you have complete power over your mindset and over how you see the possibilities and what possibilities you do see, and you have complete control over the kind of action that you take. So yes, in a challenging time, it's arguably more challenging to maybe shift mindset, because it can easily kind of go into places that is not so easy to see possibility. But boy, isn't that the greatest place of opportunity and the greatest place of being able to really kind of help yourself out of whatever place you're in and into a place of generosity and openness and kindness and joy and ease, which are all the values of abundance.
Yeah, what's your take, Phil? And how does your story of the abundance formula match up with Inga's?
I mean, it's exactly the same, obviously. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So, we all kind of met through the coaching school, and that was me thinking about, wow, I've got this powerful, amazing toolkit that I've been learning about and using, and seeing the transformation that it brings, in Inga's life, in other clients' lives. And I absolutely love that. And I wanted to think about, how do I teach other people to use that toolkit, and the toolkit, but also the mentality that goes with that, in order to use it skillfully, and the ability to get into that space of unconscious competence and let go. So that was a great journey that I went on for a long time, and it came to a kind of natural resting point. And I was then thinking, well, there's another side to this. There's actually all of the kind of learning that we were talking about in terms of how humans grow and develop, and that sort of client-side experience that we had a lovely insight into today. What are the things what are the sort of, what are the underlying things in that process that clients go through that really work for them? What am I seeing in the thousands of people that I've interacted with? And how can I like scale the impact of that? Because, you know, almost all of my work for a long time had been one-on-one and with a little bit of group coaching. I was like, there's got to be a way to take these ideas, make sense of them, and then share them with the world. And, you know, I'm getting to the middle of my life. I want to start to think about how can I have as much impact as possible and help as many people as possible with, you know, I feel so fortunate to have learned as much as I have. So how can I share that? I was looking for an outlet for it, and I had conversations with lots of people and bounced it around. I started to formulate what it might be. And talking to Inge, it just sort of came out one day. I was like, look, I think I said I'm trying to start a movement around abundance. Those are kind of, or not, I want to start a movement around abundance. I don't know if you've seen it, Robbie, there's a fantastic video about starting a movement, which is a TED talk. And I'll find the link and we can put it on the video. But, you know, with spoiler alert, basically it's a 3-minute video taken at a music festival.
I do know the one, yeah. The voiceover's by Derek Sivers, I think.
Derek Sivers, that's right. And, you know, it starts out with an empty field. One person, one crazy dancer comes into the middle of the field and starts dancing on his own, yeah?
With a really weird, like, just in case anyone can't bother to watch 3 minutes, but you should, with a really weird dance.
Yeah, it's like a bit like...
So everyone who's just listening, you need to go to YouTube and check out the video to see Phil doing that dance.
Yeah. And, you know, the guy's like, well, you haven't got a movement yet, because at the moment you're one crazy person in the field. And I kind of felt a bit like that with my ideas around abundance. I'm like, I'm a crazy person in the field. But then this person gets the most important character in starting a movement, which is the first follower, the first dancer who comes and dances with him. And then these two start dancing together, and suddenly they're having a great time, right? And the movement has begun. And over the course of the next minute or so of the video, you know, suddenly there's 3 people, there's 5 people, there's 10, there's 20, there's 50. And within 90 seconds, the whole field is rammed with people dancing. You know, so I really wanted to try and figure out, how do you do that? And, you know, Inge said, well, I'll be your crazy first follower dancer, or dance together. I was like, well, what more could I ask for? So that was really the seeds of it. You know, it's like, okay, now we've got 2 people and we both think like teaching people how to be abundant and spreading that message is a great idea. Let's go find some more people to dance with.
And so, like, because I think there's kind of 2 things that are really interesting about this. One is the ideas, and the other is the conversation we're kind of in, which is about how you decided to do this and then have so far been building the movement. Because, you know, seeing some of the things you've been doing, it's really exciting. And I remember reading when I was reading the testimonials from one of the online programs you've run, it's like there's amazing testimonials there. There's people getting amazing learning from the work that you're doing. But it feels to me like first can we get really explicit about the abundance formula? It feels like we need to do that before we go much further.
Yeah, it's like, if you bring a gun onto stage, you've got to use it at some point. That's one of the rules of theatre, right? So what is the abundance formula? The abundance formula says that abundance equals mindset plus possibility in brackets to the power of boldness.
I just want to say, brief aside, as a maths grad, I'm a really big fan of the fact that your formula has to the power of in it. Just want to say that, like, formulas are all about, you know, everyone's got a formula or an equation with multiplication or addition in it, but getting to the power of boldness in there is cool. If you're
we like power. Power is a good word, right? we love a bit of power in coaching. And, you know, how did it come about? Well, I looked at, well, what happens on a coaching journey for a client? And I don't know about you guys, and, you know, people in the audience watching this at home as well. But for me, almost always the first place that you go to with clients is looking at their inner world, their underlying mindset. You know, they're looking at the world through a particular lens. You know, Inge was sitting there thinking, my job sucks and I hate it and I feel a bit trapped. So we all have a lens that we look at the world through. We all have the mental setup that we process that information through as well. And the first piece of a coaching engagement is usually understanding, well, how are you seeing the world and how is that impacting the results that you're getting right now? And then what would happen if you change that lens and brought some different beliefs, some different emphasis, some different choices, and how does that then transform or change the world that you can see and and what might be then possible. So generally the first part of every coaching engagement I do will in some way or another be digging into someone's inner world and helping them to understand what's going on and then how do you change it. Yeah. So that's where the mindset comes from.
And we had that nice conversation last time about the difficult part in the middle of the coaching engagement where people get kind of stuck again, and how actually if the mindset stuff hasn't shown up until then, that's where it comes in. And because otherwise they would have, if you don't do the mindset work, what's changed really for people like that's the bit that stops them having the same problem repeating.
You're right. You kind of get stuck in that kind of Einsteinian definition of insanity where you try something slightly different, but the mindset drags you back into still seeing the same problems. And if you see the problems and feel the problems, then you still have those problems. So that mindset shift, if people are stuck in a scarcity mindset, which is usually there's almost always some fear that you uncover with clients when you dig into this. There's some beliefs about the world not being either I'm not enough or the world's not enough, or if I do these things, I'll be judged or I'll be rejected. All of that is very much coming from a place of scarcity, because it's scarcity about who we are and what we're capable of, and it's also scarcity beliefs about the world around us and what's available, how accepting it will be of us, what it's possible for us to do within those constraints. So I almost always see that clients are stuck in some way in fear and scarcity, and it's moving them into a place where they see, oh, actually, I am more capable. I am a human who has strong values, and I'm capable of expressing those. And I do believe some positive things about myself, and I see that I have strengths, and I see that I have value in the world, and I can acknowledge my own value. And I can also see that the world around me is full of some energy and possibility and richness and boldness. And when you do that, you go from that place of scarcity where nothing's possible into a space of much more abundant thinking, where everything starts to become workable. Everything's much more doable, right? If you're starting a coaching business and you have your first couple of prospects, and you're really terrified when you meet them and you think that you're not good enough, you project that to them, they pick that up. If you're not taking the lead because you're too scared to do so, you give them 57 choices and they don't even come to the meeting. So all these little mindset things affect our experience and the results that we get back. Once you start to switch over into the abundance space and you believe that what you have as a coach is valuable, and you believe that you're capable of delivering that in an effective way, and you also believe that people out there are open to the idea of personal development, and they want to grow and they want to be involved in a coaching relationship, and they're looking for someone to help them, that's a much more abundant mindset and a foundation to bring to approaching growing a coaching practice. And you'll see a massive difference once you make that shift over here in the way that you turn up and the way that people react to that. So that's an example of how the first part of the formula really works. That shifting that mindset into that abundant space starts to create different possibilities and allows you to take more action.
And so it sounds like also that the three aspects of the formula are like they're tied together, right? Because the mindset allows you to see the possibilities, and the possibilities includes actions and all that kind of thing. But talk me through, or talk us all through why is it important that all three of those aspects? So we've talked about mindset. Why is it important that possibilities is specified, and what is important about boldness?
Right. So for me, you can think of it almost like a pyramid. So the mindset is the foundation. Once you've got yourself into an abundant mindset, that effectively takes off your blinkers around what is possible. So this is the second layer of the pyramid, is the possibilities. Inga knew she wanted something different, but she was so blinkered that she couldn't work out what it was, or even how to start thinking about finding that. So once you're in that mindset space, you can start to see out there in the world that things are possible. How did Inga find me in the first place? Because I started to explore the possibilities of where do I find these people, and I brainstormed it, and I talked to other people, and I got input, and I drew on everything that I know, and started to actually work out, well, it might be possible to go and talk to a recruitment consultant. Maybe I should talk to websites who market to and sell complementary services to people who want to do career change. You know, maybe I should go and talk to other coaches who do different things and build partnerships with them, and they can send me career clients, and I can send them clients who have, you know, things that they want to do in the family space. So, you know, once you've got the abundance mindset, you can start to see that almost everything is possible. You can be very open in your thinking. It also kind of enables you to go out there and make connections. You know, connections are so important in making possibility and creating opportunity, because all of the things that happen come from other humans, right? So, or, you know, not everything, but a lot of things that happen are going to come from being very open with other humans, telling them what you're all about, telling them what you care about, what you're passionate about, what you want to do, listening to them and hearing that about them, and then piecing that together and saying, well, you're interested in this and I'm interested in that, but if we put that together, this could become a real possibility of something that would be a win-win for both of us. Once you're in that mindset below, you can start to create those win-wins, right? You can start to connect, you can start to see what's out there in the world. And, you know, there are different frameworks that you use as a coach to help clients to do that and explore it, right? You might do a future visioning exercise. You might get them to go and talk to other people and brainstorm. They might do a Pinterest board, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can start to, but you need to have the mindset to be able to get these possibilities in place and to start to figure out, well, what could I do and what are the right things to do?
Yeah, I just want to catch as well, because you kind of talked about win-win there. I think like two great examples of where we're often in scarcity and we could be in abundance are sales and negotiation. And both sales or negotiation can be viewed as I'm going to win. I'm going to get you to buy this thing. I don't care whether it's good for you or not. Or in the negotiation, I'm going to get what I want. I don't care what happens for you. Or they can be viewed as win-win, which is like, it would be you are the perfect client to work with me, and I'm the perfect coach for you. Let's do this together. Or if it's not good for both of us, if we're not both winning, let's not do this. And similarly in a negotiation, you know, it can be like, the reason we're having this conversation is to get some of both of what we want. And let's get creative about how to do that. And I just think that win-win frame is like, I don't know, there's something about it that sometimes gets it's almost a bit too commonly used to think about what a deep concept it is and what a difference it makes when you bring it in.
I mean, Robbie, I would say you look at Inge's story and the way that our relationship has evolved, right? From coach client, trainer, trainee to now business partners. And yeah, that takes a possibility mindset and an abundant mindset on both sides to have that flexibility to keep exploring. Well, what's this relationship now? What can we do together now that is valuable for both of us? And at different points in that relationship, it was different things. And now, you know, we love working together and creating this thing together that we're both really passionate about. And it's a relationship of absolute equals. We bring completely different and complementary skills to the table, which didn't escape my attention. You know, Inge's fabulous, you know, pulling things together, making things happen, using technology in a really effective way to bring training to life. Those are not necessarily my strengths, but you know, I bring my side of the equation in terms of creativity and big picture, and also designing training and interventions. You smoosh it together, you've got a wonderful synergy of possibility, right?
And it's not even a negotiation. It's not even I don't know, I guess is it win-win, or is it sort of feels like it's too small a term for what that is?
It's abundant.
Here we go.
And so then finish the formula.
Okay. So
boldness.
So the boldness is the cherry on the cake, right? This is when possibilities turn into opportunities, turn into reality. Because you can see all the possibilities in the universe. At some point, you've actually got to manifest some of them and make them into reality. So, you know, I could have seen the amazing idea to go and work with recruitment consultants to get loads of clients, but unless I actually went and was bold enough to go and talk to some of them, then nothing would have happened there. And, you know, so the boldness is the boldness to move into action, the boldness to engage with others, the boldness to call out possibilities that you see, with the possibility that they may be jumped on and run with, or they may be rejected. And, you know, it's the boldness to try new things, knowing that some of them are going to be great and some of them are going to not go so well, but within the things that don't go so well is actually the learning and the growth, and that information that you get from taking that first bold action informs the next bold action, which is probably even bigger and better than anything you could have conceived in the possibility phase. So this is why this is to the power of boldness, because once you've got the mindset solid and you see the possibilities and you start boldly pursuing them and making connections and bringing other people in to dance in the field with you, this magnifies and multiplies on an exponential scale the potential or the actual impact that you can create. But like we're still getting started with the abundance formula, but in the first year we've run three online courses. We've already graduated 70 or 80 people. As you said, some of the feedback we've had has been really extraordinary, and talking about huge transformations, not just in mindset, but also in the results that people are seeing in their lives, how they're growing their businesses, how they're going out and changing the way they relate to the people in their lives. So we can already see that the power of the boldness in us going from, hey, I'd like to do something with abundance, do you want to dance in the field with me? It's by taking some bold action, it's starting to multiply and grow. And we're here today talking about it because we want more people to know about it and come and experience it, so we can help to share this with the world. So the boldness is the pinnacle, right? Without that, you are someone who sees lots of great things in the world and can connect all the dots, but you don't get the change in the end, and you don't get the impact that you're really looking for.
Yeah, and Phil, I want to catch as well, because it's like this all sound like it's really hard. My experience in my life has been that it is like when you start taking bold action, you change. You completely change, and different, like, of course it feeds into other things as well. And both of you have been a part of me taking bold action in different ways. And those things, including, and I won't talk about it now, but I'll probably tell it in the intro, including a tiny bit of coaching from Inga that actually has a really important part in me going from being someone who has those first two to being someone who also takes action. And I know that for you, and we'll put a link, there's three really nice little articles you told about abundance, Phil, you wrote about abundance, Phil, on LinkedIn, and we'll put links to them. But I just want to draw at least a little bit of that out, if that's okay, because it feels important to say that you haven't always had this mindset, and that scarcity and struggle have been a big part of your journey. And it was nice reading those articles, especially having just listened back to our previous interview on the podcast, because some of the things we spoke about when we spoke about your journey are name checked in those articles, but they tell us more about the real struggle that was going on behind the scenes, including worrying every time someone walked past your desk that you were going to get fired, and actually hiding under the desk in your office with the lights off. And we did talk a little bit about crying to Sheryl Crow in the last episode, but we laughed and joked about it. Whereas actually when I was reading the story, it didn't sound funny. And it came at the end of a sequence where you'd kind of been like ambushed into being forced to travel to a different part of the USA. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that journey, the personal importance of abundance for you.
Well, I mean, I think this has been like the learning of a lifetime for me. Like, I don't want to go on in detail about my childhood, etc. But like I kind of have a belief that deep down, everybody has a connection to each other, a connection to the universe, and that we sort of know that the universe is abundant and it's kind and it's full of possibility. But our experiences as humans, we kind of learn all sorts of lessons about how the world really works, that build up over time, and everybody comes with that different mindset that we talked about as the first level. And definitely from my childhood, and even going into kind of my 20s and my early career, like I definitely had a very strong scarcity mindset. I had a lot of fear, existential fear about survival and being rejected that came from formative experiences. And I really thought like nothing very much was possible. And I was kind of destined to sort of drift through life as a victim of fate and never be able to, grasp and go after the things that deep down I knew what my values were, but I never thought I'd be able to kind of live them out. And so, kind of for me, uncovering coaching and getting into this journey and starting to make some choices, I went up through my own process. And the first piece of it, which is still an ongoing work in progress, was working on my mindset, right? Understanding how I was seeing the world and how that was impacting me. I probably said last time we talked, I felt like I was in the deepest trench, and I was just following this trench, working as an accountant, going up through the ranks, and I couldn't see my way out of it. Very similar to where Inge was, right? Where it's like, I feel like I've got no choice. I've just got to keep walking down this trench, even though it's dark and miserable and horrible down here. And every time I took a step forward, I was digging it slightly deeper. So to then get into the world of coaching and find myself a coach and start to understand that trench was of my own making, right? Like, I'd made that trench for myself. The way that I was thinking, the way I was interpreting the world, the beliefs that I had were putting me in that situation and making me really miserable and unhappy. And that I could actually do something about that, right? This is why I want to share this with as many people as possible, because I know how painful and horrible that was. And it's the worst place in the world. And every now and then everybody goes there. It happens to me sometimes. I just have one of those days where I can't see the wood for the trees. But learning how to recognize what's going on and change your beliefs and see the scarcity, and then how do I actually, as I did for myself, start to see the world through a more abundant lens and see what's possible, see that I can go and actually do something really positive with people and believe that about myself and actually become a coach. Like that was inconceivable for me when I was 29, and by 32 I was doing it. And so that took me rebooting my mental systems, doing a lot of work on that, then talking to my coach about what was possible and recognizing, I said last time, I was sitting with my coach and I said, wait a minute, you get paid to do this, right? Does that mean I could do it? And I'm like, no, that can't be possible. But then, my little new mindset sort of kicks in and went, maybe that is possible. Maybe I could actually do this, right? So then the possibilities were there. And then I had to be bold enough to go and do a coach training and stump up my own money to do it. And then I had to be bold enough to apply for a job at Deloitte to become a coach, even though I had 0 days of experience as a coach. And that's that's going through my own personal kind of abundance formula, right? And we see this with all of our clients. They change the way they see the world. Then they make different, better choices and see what's really possible. And then they go and take bold action. So it feels like the work of my lifetime, honestly, to share this and to teach it and to figure out how best to help others to do it. Because I can see the change that it's made for me. I can now see the change that it's made from many of my clients. And now with the abundance formula, I can see how we can do that with groups, and actually how these groups become so powerful at helping each other to work on these steps. It's really extraordinary when you get an amazing group of people together, how that connection helps people to be honest, to be vulnerable, to look at what's going on, and to make that shift happen.
So much in there. And I think it's like really important to notice that also in there, there's a couple of important things to pull out, I think. One is that you still get those days where you slip out of it. And I think that's important to say. I actually want to say, I had one, like listening back to our last interview. I was like, Phil is doing this cool work. And actually, this Phil's new business, that's kind of the work that I want to be doing more of. And if Phil's doing it, there's no possible, what's the point? Really, what's the point? Because Phil is done, he's 8 years or 9 years ahead of me in terms of coaching. His strategic thinking is completely different to mine. There's just no way that's gonna happen. And then to look back, to what we were saying earlier, what you were saying, Inge, it takes me less time to get over that than it used to. And that's one of the key things. And of course, you can catch lots of scarcity in that story, one of which is that that if Phil's doing it, I can't do it, that there's somehow not enough space for those two things to happen. And the other one the kind of insight that actually was really helpful to me when I was thinking about yesterday is a nice little one, which is comparing myself to me of yesterday, not Phil today. Because Phil today is just a different thing. And also I don't know what it's like to be Phil. I don't know what his mindset is like and all those kind of things. So I just think that's important to catch, that it's like,
Well,
you don't one day become completely abundant forever necessarily.
yeah, Inga, you made a fantastic point about this, which is it's much more about the ability to catch it and recognize it in the shorter and shorter lead times. And then, one of the things that we teach a lot in the formula is, first of all, how do you recognize what's going on as quickly as possible? And then how do you, what are the things that you can do to work yourself back into that more abundant space? Whether it's going back to your, looking at some underlying beliefs and, playing them back through in your head, whether it's like connecting to other people who will kind of, talk you down off the ledge, whether it's like doing some self-care and, finding some space to go into a completely different mental zone. There are so many things that you learn over the years and that you see with clients that A, allow you to catch it more quickly, and B, then allow you to, or help you to get through it. But of course it happens, and sometimes it takes longer than others. But the quicker you can get back in the abundance space, the quicker you can get on with doing your best self.
And what a nice thing to have that community as part of the journey, because how often is that helpful? I want to come back to you in a second, Inga, just to ask about in some ways what abundance means to you. But before that, I just want to, there's another distinction you kind of kept making there, Phil, that I think is important to draw out, because you kept talking about the scarcity mindset. And I think it's a bit like, if we're ever thinking about like the victim player mindset, it's always really important to distinguish between the victim mindset and being a victim. And I wonder if it's important also to make a distinction between the scarcity mindset and living in actual scarcity, because it strikes me that whilst having like you said before, Inga, who wouldn't want to be more abundant, and where is more abundance not useful when it comes to a mindset? I think it's really, I imagine you're not saying, well, if you just change your mindset, then your children will have enough food to eat, if that's what you're really struggling with. So I wonder if either of you could speak to, like, I don't know if it's just that distinction between real scarcity and scarcity mindset, or if it's like, when is it about, because it strikes me that sometimes it's probably not about changing mindset, it's about fixing the scarcity problem, and that's the most important place for us to go. Yeah. So either of you dive into that.
So I'll have a go, and you can have a go too if you want. Like, I think this is it's really interesting territory to go into. You're right. There are some people in the world who live in real scarcity, and that is absolutely tragic. But actually, when researchers have gone and talk to those people, they see a range of mindsets that people have, and also a range of perspectives on their situation. Some people are distraught about the situation that they find themselves in, and other people have a much more positive mentality. And the ones who have a positive lens that they bring to it see that this is my life right now, and I'm going to make the most of what I've got and aspire to make things, I have the capability to work to make things better. So even there, you can see that base mentality can make a huge difference just to how you experience your circumstances and how you feel about yourself in those circumstances, and then to the sense of agency that you have to do something about it. And you're right, I would love that we could fix everybody's situation in the world. It's not realistic to do that, right? At the same time, you're right. We can think ourselves into a victim space, a scarcity space. I'll see ourselves as a victim, and at that point, you're back in my rut that I was talking about, right? Where you lose all your agency to actually, you don't see any possibility, and you lose agency to take action or be bold to do anything about that. So I think, even saying you've got a scarcity mindset moves you away from being scarce, right? Because let's be honest, like, when you think about the people we were talking about and who are living on $1 a day and really struggling to survive, none of us in the Western world, and probably nobody who's listening to this podcast, is living in those conditions. And we can count our blessings and our good fortunes. And actually, when we started the first abundance course, the first thing I said is rejoice, because you're abundant right now, right? And we're all abundant. The fact that we're able to do this, we can make an hour of our lives or 90 minutes of our lives to come together as a group and even talk about abundance means we're really freaking abundant right now. So yeah, that's an immediate recognition going from I'm scarce to scarcity mindset to actually I'm abundant. And we all are extraordinarily abundant as we sit here right now.
I think like a huge part of me shifting out of a much more scarcity focused mindset and into a much more abundant mindset was really understanding what you've just said. I don't think it can be like understated that if, you know, I feel I'm like one of the luckiest people ever to have been born into this. I mean, particularly, you know, we've all lived in the UK, we've lived in Europe. It's like to have been born into this place in this time. You know, it's like actually by so many measures that it is an amazing time to be alive. I want to catch a cool thing, actually. I don't know if you know this. It's in, I think behind me somewhere, I've got Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman. There's a great bit of research in there, which I just think is really important to catch, which is that it seems like when we're in actual scarcity, so there's this experiment with sugar farmers, like our verbal reasoning goes down. So it's like, so I was a bit too sunny, I think, about abundant scarcity mindsets, although, you know, which is like, everyone just changed their mindset. And then you get this sense of, and I can remember this at times in my life where nothing's been as scarce as the Indian sugar farmers or the people on $1 a day, but the finance has been much more pressured. You can kind of feel your verbal, it rings true to me to remember. It's like, yeah, my verbal reasoning gets worse, like the whole thing, everything's much harder. And I think, so the reason I'm saying this now is, for me, it feels important to say there are times when the most important thing is to shift that pressure. And it might be through bold action, like that might be important, but it might be through really dull, practical action. And because sometimes getting the foundations under us is the most important thing we can do, or at least that's what it feels like from my life. I just wanted to put that in as well.
I'd love to speak a little bit to the boldness aspect. And, you know, it can, in some minds, it can land as, you know, it has to be the big thing that we do. And sometimes it is a big thing, you know, it is making that phone call and saying yes or saying no. Sometimes it, like what you just alluded to, Robbie, it is the really small, daily, frankly, quite boring things that are also, there are moments of courage and they are moments of boldness. You know, if you want to run a marathon, you're not going to just put your trainers on and start running and keep running for, you know, 3 or 4 hours or 6 hours or whatever. Your first step is going to be decide. Your next step might be dust off my trainers. That's what I'm going to do today. You know, tomorrow I'm going to actually put them on, and the next day I'm going to put them on and go for a walk around the block. You know, sometimes boldness is a habit. And it's not 1, 2, 3 big, bold moves. Sometimes it's the sustained, small, bold actions that get you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's I don't know, there's some kind of distinction here, isn't there, about boldness versus, I don't know, like foolhardiness or just like, it's like, you know, is it bold to jump into a big lake when you can't swim? Like, I don't know. It feels like the spirit is not, that's not what we're talking about, right? So maybe that's a really important thing to speak a bit more to. I mean, either of you, what makes the boldness wise and what makes it foolhardy in terms of abundance in the formula, something like that?
I mean, from my perspective, you know, I was talking about my own experience, you know, all those times when I was lost and miserable and struggling and helpless, underneath it all, I still had a sense of myself and what my values were and what was important to me. You know, I wanted to be kind to other people, to help other people to grow and develop and to be, you know, a support to others. So those little voices were inside me the whole time, but I had a tremendous amount of fear about expressing them. And yeah, I think everybody, to a greater or lesser extent, has a feeling of their sense of values and an idea of how they might want to express that in the world. But then there's also a lot of the scarcity and fear around who we are, our own sense of self, how other people perceive us, that can hold us back from turning those values into a big action or a small action, or doing anything at all with them, right? Expressing ourselves even in the slightest. So for me, the boldness is having that, it's about having the courage to take an action, big, tiny, medium-sized, massive, humongous, whatever it might be, where you listen to your inner voice, you connect with that, and you take that step. And you pick up the phone or you dust off your trainers, and this is something that is personally connected for me, and I'm going to step away from all the things that are screaming inside of me saying, don't do this, this is dangerous, this is wrong, this is going to get you judged. And I'm going to put all of those to one side. I'm going to say, this is possible, I'm going to express myself, I'm going to do this. And anybody who's a coach who's listening to this has done that to a massive extent, because they know there are some values inside of all of us who do this that drive us to do this, right? We want to help people grow and develop and reach their potential, and we'll all express it in our own way. So it takes real boldness to go and do that, right? Because loads of people in society say, what gives you the right to do something you love and enjoy for your living, right? So it's a little bold to make that choice and say, no, I'm going to do something I love. And I also believe it's valuable. And I also believe I can be really capable at that. And I will commit to it and develop. All of those are very bold choices in my view, Robbie. So is that a helpful kind of answer to your question?
Yeah. And what I want to pull out, I think that's in there, one of the things that's really in there is that a lot of this is boldness about, and this is not surprise for us, and we can name this as it is, and not everyone would see that, but it's actually boldness about personal transformation. In some ways, it's what we're talking about, I think, is the action that leads us to transform. And yes, there are things outside in the world, but if you go back to my, bad but stark metaphor, it's like jumping in the lake without being able to swim does not help us transform. It's going to kill us, right? And what does help us transform is something completely different. So I think that's really nice, and there's lots more texture in there, Phil, that we could jump into.
Yeah, if you want to go in the lake, have the boldness to go and connect to some people and learn how to swim and enjoy that, right? And then go jump in the lake.
And to catch it, that's one of the things that has held me back lots in my life up until the last few years, is not being bold enough to risk looking stupid by being a beginner at something. And I think that's a really important thing to say. I'm aware, Inga, that we're going to lose you in a few minutes. And so before we do that, and then Phil and I are going to have a last little bit of the call, I want to come back to that question that I hinted at before, but maybe add a little bit extra onto it. Like, why is the abundance formula important to you, and what are you excited about that's coming up in the work that you two are doing together on this?
Why is it important to me? I'd echo quite a lot of what Phil was sharing with us today about this journey of this inner drive and these values of wanting to share what I know. Again, I similarly feel extremely grateful to have the curiosity and the motivation and the opportunities to learn as much as I have and to experience as much as I have. And I would imagine that drives a lot of coaches to do what we do, to kind of get to, I got to a certain stage in my development where I thought, that's really great for me, but now, so what? Like, what for? What's it in service of? I can read another 100 books and I can improve myself, but why? And that's kind of where it all ties back to, Tony Robbins has this model of human needs, and he talks about four needs of the personality and 2 needs of the spirit. And our human spirit has 2 needs, which is learning and growth, which I absolutely love. And the other one is contribution. And it's, why do we learn and why do we grow? So that we can give more, we can contribute more, we can share more. And that's actually, in a way, it's a selfless act, and in a way it's a very selfish act, because we all have the need for it, and it feels just damn good to be able to contribute and give and have that feeling of being important, I guess, and worthy and of value, and being able to do something that is valuable. And for me, it's kind of, I'm just so interested in kind of maximizing what I can do and getting the most out of my human existence and learning how this machine works and learning to operate it better and better. Like I love to share that. And my mind is very like, it loves models. And what I love about the abundance formula, it for me feels like a meta model. Like everything fits inside it. You want to do anything, it's somewhere in the abundance formula. You getting stuck on something, it's somewhere in the abundance formula. Either you don't believe you can, or you don't see how you can, or you're just not doing it. Somewhere there is the key. And that's what I'm just, for me, that's, it seems simple. It's just 3 words, but it kind of encapsulates, 20, 30, 40 years worth of learning and knowledge. And, whichever way you look at it, you can just find the answers. So that's what's exciting about it for me.
Yeah, beautiful. And where, for people who are interested, where should they look, and what have you two got coming up when it comes to the abundance formula?
Phil, do you want to tell them about the quiz?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that we wanted to do is, as a real intro to even the mindset thing, is to put together a kind of online questionnaire. And in that, we talk about abundance superpowers. So, we kind of sat down and thought about, well, everybody has real strengths and superpowers that they bring to the world. And different people, I think, anybody who's on the coaching journey, some people will be your mindset gurus, and they'll have a really, they'll have a strength around the mindset, and it might be kind of internal. They might have a really strong sense of self and belief in themselves. So they might be great at like believing that the world is abundant and rich and possible. Some people will be possibility experts. Some people will be boldness experts in different ways. So we put together an online questionnaire to fill out, and at the end of it, you get one of 6 abundance superpowers, which will call out. This is a way that you can start to really leverage your natural capabilities around abundance. It'll talk about what you're demonstrating. So it might say you're a guru, you have a really strong internal mindset, and here are some ways that you can use that self-belief in order to kind of put yourself out even more, and to use that strength of inner belief to start to take that out into the world. So Robbie, I'm sure you'll post a link to this, but it takes 5 minutes to fill in, and then afterwards you get your results, and there's a bunch of resources and kind of follow-up that comes your way as well.
Yeah, so I'm a visionary. That's what I came back in mind. Does that sound like it's working, Phil? You know me pretty well.
That sounds pretty spot on, Robbie. I mean, here we are on this thing that you envisioned, and we're on episode 28, right? So that tells me you're pretty good at, seeing the possibilities, bringing people together, making things happen, and that's what visionaries really do. So, this is a really valuable tool, we hope, for people just to get a little bit more insight into what the abundance formula is all about. Going into the autumn, we are going to run our Living Your Best Life course again, which is the course we've run twice now. It's a 3-month program, which has a weekly Zoom community that come together, and it's a program to walk through each of the areas of the formula in much more depth. We talk about creating an abundance compass, which allows you to set up the life that you're looking to lead, and what abundance looks like for you, and what are the factors that create abundance. And then we kind of walk through each of the steps to build that pyramid for each person. And we encourage, and we really set it up so that the group support each other a lot to embody and take in each of those steps. And that's been such an amazing course. I've never been on a program where everyone turns up to every session at the end and say, we want more. Like, it was kind of overwhelming. The response that we had to the first couple of those. So we want to run it again and open that up to more people, and just keep on kind of building our community. Yeah. So those are, I think, 2 of our next steps. Is there anything I missed there, Inga?
Those are the main ones. And I would just say, come and dance with us in the field. Come and do the test. If you like, join our mailing list as part of that, and there'll be the opportunity to do that. And then you're in the field, and we'll keep giving you opportunities to join in as much and as you like. Every now and again, we run open houses completely free. Come and learn and connect with the community. Just a point to note, the community, it's like it becomes the formula in action. It's not just a learning community. We're now we're hearing about people partnering up and creating new ventures and initiatives. And, it's just, for me, it's so inspiring to see what can happen when you put a bunch of really like-minded individuals together and have these conversations and facilitate these kind of conversations. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. Possibilities are endless.
Yeah, amazing. So cool to hear about that. So Inge, we need to say goodbye to you because you have other things, of course, in a day full of abundance. But thanks so much for being with us on the show. The link is theabundanceformula.co. Is that right?
That's right. The Abundance Formula. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put that obviously wherever anyone's listening to this. But I'm sure there'll be some people curious to check that out. So yeah, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, love it. And can't wait to have you dance in our field even more and more and more.
Yeah, mostly so far I've done the quiz and I've added some 90s guitar music to your abundance playlist on Spotify because that's my bag. But looking forward to seeing where all this goes. And thanks so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you guys. See you later.
See you soon.
Bye.
And then Phil, it'll be lovely just before we wrap up the call. Well, I guess actually let's stay with abundance just for a few more minutes. I just want, before we move on from that, because one of the things I love about being in the space with you is your ability to see things and connect things together. And I think that's part of why the coach training you pulled together was so useful for me. It's lovely to hear some of the echoes of that and the strengths you were using when you made that in the abundance formula. I just wonder, thinking about the kind of people that might be listening to this podcast, the audience, there'll be people who aren't coaches, but knowing that that's a part of why we're here. Is there anything that we haven't talked about? You've done this beautifully as we went. Is there anything we haven't talked about the abundance formula that you think is just particularly important for us to pull out for coaches who are listening, who might be in the scarcity mindset or might be able to shift into that abundance mindset even more?
I mean, I guess, I sort of alluded a bit to my own experience, and we talked about that previous podcast as well. Like, for me, what I put into the abundance formula is pretty much all the learnings that I'd taken for myself from 15 years of growing a coaching practice. So, when I started out, I didn't fully believe in myself as a coach and the value that I could bring, and I didn't feel confident about myself. I struggled to get any prospects, and then I really struggled to convert them. That was all a mindset thing for me. That was all a mindset thing. There was just that there's a lot of scarcity. I didn't believe that anybody would really want to work with me. I didn't believe that the possibility, that I was capable of doing this. Once I started to build a bit of mindset around that, my journey has been all about learning how to create the possibilities. You saw how I ended up working with Inge. I completely forgotten that was the case. But, this is how I've learned over time how to connect things together and how to create possibilities and opportunities for people. So, the coaching school brought all of us together, and now we're here doing this podcast. And for me, if you're a coach or someone who's in the coaching world and you want to do things around this, what's really important is looking at how you can intersect with other people, understand them, bring them together, create things of value together. And that self-expression we talked about, like, when you can learn how to express that and turn it into possibilities and then intersect that with other people's possibilities, all sorts of things mushroom, right? Here you are doing your podcast because you did your coach training. I'm doing the abundance formula. I've done a coaching training organization. Learning to think in that possibility way has kept me going and made my work more and more abundant over the last 15 years, because I'm always looking at what's possible here. I don't just want to, I love being a one-on-one coach, but I don't want that to be the sole constraint on what I do. And actually, as I said, the genesis of this was how do I express myself even more, share my learning even more, and create more impact. And we talked about the pandemic earlier and the impact it's had. Suddenly the penny dropped for me. This whole Zoom video thing is amazing for connecting people. Like our first course that we did, we had people in 9 countries on 3 different continents dialing into every session. And it was kind of mind-boggling, right? You can bring these amazing people together from all over the world who have this shared intention to learn about abundance, support each other, grow. And then they were connecting on WhatsApp because the technology allows you to do that. And we were using a kind of Miro board to collect our ideas. And you can see how learning to think in that creative, generative possibility way just unpicks so much opportunity. And so anybody who wants to learn more about how to do that, like the abundance formula is I want to share that because it's just fabulous. Like it's to be able to make these things, to manifest these things into reality, just feels amazing.
Yeah, so nice. Such a good way of pulling all that together. Phil, let's like segue a little bit, because it's the reason really that we're carrying on this conversation. One of the reasons we're carrying on this conversation after Inge has left is that when I was listening back to our previous conversation recently, it made me realize I wanted to catch up, really. It was like a beautiful opportunity. Not, I mean, for me, yes, it's fun, but also for listeners, it's an interesting opportunity that we've got by speaking again to kind of check in on where you were before and what's happened with your business. And like as we said at the start of the show, it's been an 18 months since we last spoke on the podcast, like no other in the history of humanity. And what an interesting thing to therefore be reflecting on. And last time we spoke, you said towards the end that you were kind of 75-80% of the way through a transition from, for people who haven't listened, from a very successful career coaching business to something different, something much more focused on the MDs, CEOs, entrepreneurs who are in the startup to scale up phase of their business. And I just wonder if you could, what's it been like, as a really open question, over the last 18 months as you've moved into that last 20% of that shift?
Oh, that's, I mean, even to hear that is like really interesting, because 18 months can, particularly in COVID times, can feel like about 10 years. It feels like about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, what does my world look like today? So in terms of my practice, I'm 100% of the way through that transition. Yeah, I've got now a portfolio of about 10 businesses that I support. Some of them, it's just working with the founder, MD, CEO person, because they're in an early startup phase, to help them learn how to lead, to think strategically, their pathway to whatever exit they're looking for, and accelerating that along the journey. Some of them are much more sophisticated scale-up style businesses, because all my businesses are somewhere on the journey, startup, scale up. And I'm working with, maybe the founder or the CEO, and then some of the leadership team, and we're doing some one-on-one coaching, and we're also doing some kind of group work and looking at how they work together more effectively as a team. And even potentially there's a few bits of consulting work we're doing around building culture, or how to deliver high quality output, and what that looks like within a growing business. So yeah, the transition is absolutely complete. I love it. You probably heard me talking about impact quite a few times on this conversation. And for me, moving from that one-on-one career coaching space, which has individual impact, to working with organizations where there's the collective impact of the people within the business, and then there's the impact of these businesses on the world. And a lot of the, most of the businesses I'm working with are doing really cool stuff. They're sending people on adventure yachting holidays. They're helping people connect through creating personalized cards and presents. They're supporting charities and nonprofits to engage their stakeholders more effectively. So I love the businesses that I'm helping to grow. I'm seeing the impact on the teams, and the way that they work together, and the way that they lead each other and connect. And then I'm seeing the impact on the world. So yeah, my practice I'm absolutely loving it, and taking that risk and being bold again really worked out for me.
Yeah, and we touched on when we spoke at length in episode 2 about the importance of, I guess, your values around self-care and your life and having your life right, as to be supported and intertwined with your business in a way that felt really good. And one of the things that you were again, this might be cool for you to hear back, that you were exploring then was what's the balance? How does it look? How many clients can I engage with now that I'm engaging with them in this different way? And I'm wondering what you've learned about that in the last year or so.
Well, that's a good question. Definitely that those principles are very much still at the forefront of the way that I go about things. Hearing Inga's experience was really interesting, of kind of doing the Tony Robbins fire hose and then burning out. I definitely think for the kind of clients that I work with and the sort of engagement that you're looking for, you have to be towards the Tony Robbins end of the scale in terms of you have to really lead the conversations. You have to be very much on top of where things are going. You've got to help them own that big objective that they're working towards, the grand vision of the business, the exit, whatever it might be, and make sure that everything you're doing is additive to that and, a catalyst in the best way possible to get them there. So you really have to be on top of your game. So, at the moment, I am more or less keeping Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to serve my clients, which is probably 2, 3, maximum 4 sessions a day of one-on-one service. And then maybe throwing in a workshop here or there. Thursday is my kind of creative passion projects day. So that's when the abundance formula comes into play. I've also, in the last 6 months, started doing an associate model because I'm getting so many requests for work from my existing clients and from new people that I just don't have the capacity to service anymore. So I started building that up, and I'm using Thursdays to do that. And then Friday's golf day at the moment. So I go and play golf, and then I often come back and do a bit of work or something creative and fun, or write something for the abundance formula. And then I go and hang out with my kids, and then it's the weekend, and the weekend is the weekend. So that's definitely for joy and fun and relaxation and spending time with the people I care about. So I feel incredibly fortunate. I feel very abundant in the way that things are now, and it's not like this is a miracle, some kind of magic thing that's happened overnight. It takes a lot of thought. And actually, you said to me in the email for setting this up that you're now working 3-1-1, and we had a session where you were the client and we were working around that, and I've basically stolen your idea, and now I'm doing 3-1-1. And I've forgotten that we actually did that. So.
Yeah, it's funny. It's only just happened, basically. For listeners, this was Phil coaching me as part of a training. It was like a demo for some coaching training, and it emerged for me that really what I wanted was 3 days of coaching work, 1 day to work on those. It's called my creativity days, is what it says in my calendar, but it's very similar to what you described. And then at some point, I knew I didn't want to work 5 days a week, and I chose the break of paternity leave as the chance to kind of, because my calendar got pretty empty, I shut the business for that, then it was obvious that there was an opportunity to do that, and a really good reason, because there's a small girl somewhere else in this flat who it's great to spend time with on that day.
And I would point out to you, Robbie, that this is an example of the abundance formula in action again, right? Because if your mindset says you have to work 5 days a week, or your mindset says the world is scarce and you can't make enough money from coaching to not work full time, then even the possibility of doing something different can't exist. If you change your mindset to say, well, I need to have balance, I want to do high quality work, I want to work with clients where I really create impact, then you can move into the space of possibility. So, well, what could I do with this? How can I make that work? For me, moving from career coaching clients, that B2C market, into the B2B market of working with organizations, there's a different revenue model and different pricing that comes into play. So you can you can value your time different, at a higher level, which then opens up the potential for, well, how much do you want to do, and what does time freedom look like, and what does financial abundance look like for you? And you can start playing with those possibilities and find what works for you. And then it's actually having the boldness to say, well, I've been doing this thing for 5 years and it's been working really well. I'm going to effectively end that and start something completely different, and then start 2 new things on top of that. That's the boldness, right? But for me, that's what brings the juice in life, and that's the massive opportunity that I see, in sharing this abundance formula with other people, because that opportunity is there. When we understand what we really want, set up the mindset for it, and get the self-expression, you can then be bold about starting to bring that into your life. And God, I don't want to sound like a arrogant idiot. It takes a lot of work. It's really scary and it's difficult. And there are 1,000 people I need to credit along my journey who've kept me on the straight and narrow when I was in really difficult places and not able to do it for myself. And it's a lot of work that I've had to do and what I enjoyed doing. And it's an ongoing piece of work to stay there. Like we said, we can all have days when we think, well, really? Who are you kidding, right? Like, this can't be real, and this is going to fall apart, and you might as well go back to whatever safety is. So it's the formula in action. It's showing that you've always got to keep working it, right? You've always got to keep working at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that feels like just a really beautiful place to bring the conversation to a close. It does feel like, to me, those things that you just pulled out in the last thing you said are just so important. If we have that vision and we keep doing our work on our mindset, and we, one of the absolute, one of the biggest shifts that I've had is just when I realized you can make this stuff up. I mean, you can make up how a coaching business works.
Oh yeah, you can do whatever you want.
And that, when you realize that, you can, the possibilities become endless because you can make them up. And that's quite an exciting place to be. It's difficult sometimes as well, because you realize you have to make it up if you want it to happen. But it's like, it's way preferable. Even the difficult things about abundance, and there are problems of abundance that we all come across, even the difficult things, I think are much better than the terrible trench of scarcity.
Yeah, that's right. And like we said, if you want to go swim in the beautiful lake and you don't know how to swim, then you maybe have to do all the work to go learn how to swim and get some support and other people to help you. And that's one of the things I feel that we all do in this coaching world, this coaching community, is we want to help people to swim so they can go swim in their beautiful mountain lake, right? And not drown as a consequence.
Yeah, but also more than not drown as a consequence, not miss out on being able to swim in a beautiful lake because they're too scared, like I have been in many things in my life, to learn, right? That's just as bad in some ways as
well, that's even worse.
It's another kind of death, isn't it?
I'm not even knowing that the lake exists.
Yeah,
that's the possibility, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, yeah, metaphorical now.
It's perfect. Amazing. Phil, before we bring the call to a close, is there anything else that feels important to share, or anything that's been in your mind through this call that you want to catch before we say goodbye?
I mean, the only thing the one question I would ask you, Robbie, is, we did our last conversation 18 months ago. What have you learned over the last 18 months?
Good question. Well, I think that the personal journey that I've been on is one about trust. And so to make it, one of the things I wrote down during this call is scarcity equals a thinking thing, ? That's certainly what it, feels like to me, that when a bit like when we're talking about coaching, so the big shift that you described in my coaching came when I stopped thinking, essentially. Suddenly, my coaching was a lot better. Now, you can't skip the thinking phase. That's Inga's conscious competence piece, I think, or one of those. Like,
that's right.
Like, you can't skip that bit. You have to go through it. And the point where you let go and trust more is where the power in the coaching comes. And for me, I would say this has been on my personal growth radar, like the struggle that I've been working on for I mean, at least 3 years, 4, but it's been a big part of the last 18 months. And I mean, the other thing, you know, yeah, so that's been going on. I think that's been a big one. And then, you know, I've learned so much from being a dad, and I've, and then here's a last interesting thing. So maybe interesting. Let's see if it is when I say it. So I've had this interesting shift, and I'm sure I'll talk about it more on the podcast at some point when it's kind of further. But you know, one of the trust things has been, I've kind of known where I was going to take my work and what I was going to, like, the themes of it for the next phase, because I feel like I'm coming to the end of maybe we talked in the first episode that we did about the 7-year itch, right? Maybe I'm at that stage. It's not quite 7 years with coaching, but if we go to the start of my career change, we're kind of over 7 years now. It's like, what's going to happen in that next phase? And what's been interesting is to see that I've kind of known those things for a while. And then for some reason, perhaps because of the work on trust, that they feel different. And that I think it probably is a scarcity abundance shift. You know, because if we've got that beautiful lens that we've been in, it's the scarcity of, I can only choose a certain number of ways of working or things I can work on, or I might get it wrong, right? If I choose the wrong thing to focus on my business for the next few years, I might get the wrong one. And then, you know, on some level, I'll die is where I might go.
No.
If you dig enough into me, right, it's like, yeah, I'll be humiliated, I'll run out of money, and I'll be abandoned and I'll die. And instead, abundance, right, which is, well, I can just start working on the things that I'm interested in and see where those things roll out. And of course, they're the things that I've always been interested in to some extent, their creativity and leadership and coaching. And that's, you know, really why we're here.
What a beautiful answer. Yeah, what I hear there is, you know, trust yourself, trust the universe, and in that space everything is possible, and you can go and express yourself and create. And there's, you know, with that trust in place, there's no downside. It's only abundant and upside. So I think that's a wonderful place to be working towards. I'd love to hear that. And yeah, I'd also say that I know you're a relatively new dad. You know, the trust thing as a parent is the biggest thing. You've got to, because when you get a kid, you don't get an instruction manual. So you've got to trust yourself that your instincts are good, right? So there's a big learning you can get there as well. And you'll see that you consistently have that human intuition to do the right thing. And it takes a long time to actually trust yourself. Yeah, I even though I don't technically know what I'm doing, I actually do already know what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And wrapped up in there, the last thing which just came up as you were talking, you know, I've heard someone say before, their children are their best coach, or you know, something like that. And one of the things that, like I said, so people should check this out if they haven't read it. It's a beautiful book by Robert Holden, whose work I've been in quite a lot in the last year, called Lovability. And it's a book about love. And so that's been in my mind a lot. And there's no more, for me, there's been, you know, what an amazing piece of love that I have, and experience of love. And so Leah has also been great for bringing me back to that a lot.
Amazing. What a gem, Robbie.
Yeah. Yeah, Phil, thanks for that question, and for all your generosity with your time today. To date this call, I don't mind calls being dated. Some people like to keep their podcasts really evergreen. One of the reasons we need to finish now is because it's not too long until England will play Germany in the last 16 of Euro 2021. I don't know how much you're into football these days, but how are you approaching England having to play Germany? Is this one of the few times when it's good to approach with a scarcity mindset, which is that the Germans always win, so at least then you can't be disappointed?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Maybe we need another 2 hours to think about that.
I mean, I think, yeah, looking back historically at some of England football's kind of biggest collapses, you know, in the heat of the moment, in the penalty shootouts, like definitely they could do with a bit of abundance formula in their life. Yeah. And I think they've been working on, you can kind of see that over the last few years, that they've been building up their mentality and starting to believe that they can actually beat a team like Germany. So it makes it more possible that it could actually happen. I'm just going to leave it there.
yeah. Well, and/or I'll edit this out and I'll put in you predicting 6-0 win if it was a 6-0 win. Yeah.
I'm going to turn into Paul the predicting octopus here. If I get this right, then you're going to be asking me before every match forever. Absolutely. So I'm not going to make a prediction. I'm just going to enjoy the game. That's the true abundance of it, right? It's going to be a 10 out of 10 game, regardless of the result.
Absolutely. Amazing. Phil, thanks so much.
Robbie, it's an absolute pleasure and a joy. Thank you for having me and Inga on.